All right, everyone, sit down. Let's have a little chat about misguided and misinformed authors, just what everyone wants to talk about on a Friday afternoon. Now, for those of you who aren't on Twitter, thank the gods every single day that you don't subject yourself to the madness that crosses my screen and makes me want to rip my hair out and burn my eyes from their sockets. But for those of you who are sane enough to avoid Twitter, let me just ruin your life a little bit by telling you about some of the drama happening over there. Now, I'm not going to mention any names because, believe it or not, I'm not actually trying to rag on anybody specifically, but I am going to rag on the general hubris and arrogance of this latest generation of authors who, in this fast-paced internet age, want a lot of something for virtually nothing. And this isn't a problem specific to authors, actually. We see this all across society right now. It's more about pride and maybe laziness than anything else. So all that being said, the question that the writing community has gathered around lately and the discussion and arguments that are being had basically boil down to, do we really need editors? This is an argument that is specifically coming from the indie author community, as trad published authors are typically just given an editor as part of the entire process. Indie fantasy, or indie authors in general, have kind of had a boom in popularity since 2020. You know, that time when we were all stuck inside for a long time. And what that period of time did is make everyone who runs their local D&D games think that they can write a book. Now, I have some friends and know several authors who happened to get their start there, and they write excellent fantasy. This is not about them. But those people are rare. They are exceptional. It is not a given that because you play make-believe with your friends that you will then be able to write a compelling story on paper. The reason I say all of this is because people who got into writing during this time seem to believe that becoming an author should not have to cost anything. After all, it is just thinking and writing things down, right? So many people have come to believe that they can watch a couple Brandon Sanderson or Neil Gaiman writing masterclasses on YouTube and be able to keep up with the best of them, and thus the market is flooded with just lots and lots of really terrible indie books. Now, don't get it twisted, some of my favorite books of all time are indie. We Men of Ash and Shadow by H.L. Tinsley, the Threadlight Trilogy by Zach Argyle, We Break Immortals, and The Monsters We Feed by Thomas Howard Riley, all deserving a place on the bookshelf next to traditionally published authors of the highest caliber. My point is that there's way more bad than good. Does that mean people shouldn't write? No, of course not. I love that more people are getting into fantasy and stretching their creative muscles and putting themselves out there. The problem comes when authors ask, do we really need editors? And then wonder why their books aren't selling. Sometimes the first book does okay off a strong premise, but the sequel drops off really hard because readers don't complain sometimes. Sometimes they just leave. No review, no feedback, they're just gone. That is the majority. The reviews that you're seeing on some of these websites are the people that cared enough to say something. They're the ones that, gave a shit. But most readers, if they don't enjoy something, they're just gone. And indie authors are already fighting the perception that indie is lower quality than TradPub. If a reader starts to feel that perception while reading, they'll just DNF and move on. You usually do not get a second chance. So let me break down the internet's argument, the things that they bring up whenever this discussion pops up, and then afterwards we'll go one by one through each of these and I'll give my thoughts. Point number one is some of us don't make much money and can't afford editing services. Point number 2 is I have beta or alpha readers that review my work and act as my editors, as well as other author friends who peer review my work. This is a really fun discussion point. Just wait. Point number 3, I edit it myself. After writing, I take lots and lots of time to go over my work several times and do my own editing. These are 3 big argument points that I see people make in favor of not hiring an editor. There are other points that people bring up, but these are by far the most common that I see on Twitter. I'm going to address all of these in order, but first I would like to say very clearly who this video is meant for and who it is not, because I think there's some confusion when this gets brought up. There is a difference between someone who is writing for fun, just wanting to get their work out there for their friends and family to be proud of, and for the writer to be proud of themselves for, making a complete story. And maybe those people don't expect any great success. They just want their work to be accessible by the public. This video is not directed at you. You should enjoy writing in whatever way you see fit. If you want to write your work on a tablet in a cave and that brings you joy, that's awesome. I occasionally paint Warhammer and D&D figures. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I've watched some YouTube videos on it. I put Dexter on in the background and I just sit and paint. And afterwards I take a picture of what I painted and I either put it back in the box or up on a shelf or I give it to a friend. I'm not expecting a career in painting minifigures, and that's okay. Who this video is meant for are the people who are truly trying to sell a book, who want to be taken seriously in their ambitions to become an author, especially if they eventually hope to be a trad published author someday. Because I see all the time people say things like, I don't need an editor, or I don't need a good cover artist, and then months later are making posts about how hard it is being an author who sold 3 books last year. Now, to be fair, there are authors who have succeeded without an editor. I'm sure there's too many authors out there for that not to be true. But let's be real. Let's dial it back. Those people are either extremely skilled or extremely lucky. They are the outliers. They are the exception. With that said, let's address these one at a time. Number 1, some of us don't make much money and can't afford editing services. Now, this may seem like a hard point to argue with, but I promise I found a way. I think this point is often used as kind of an argument stopper. Like there can be no rebuttal since the bottom line is that you can't afford an editor. Now, look, I am fully aware that everyone's financial situation is different. I am by no means a rich man myself, but let me ask you, do you live below your financial means in order to put money aside? I could go through an entire financial planning deep dive, but I think we all probably get the picture here. If there is something you want that you know that you'll need in the future, you live below your means now, put money aside little by little and save up for it. It's how the entire world works with basically everything. The sticker shock on some of these things like editors is certainly real. I'm not arguing that for the most part, but while you are writing your book, while you're taking that time for 2 years, 3 years, however long it takes, take that bit of extra money each month or each paycheck or whatever you do that you can set aside and put it towards funding for an editor or other things like a cover artist. You'd be surprised how much money you'll have by the time you get to the point where you need one. There's also GoFundMe and Kickstarter. I can't guarantee those will always work, but they are an option. And people act like saving money and setting it aside is an absurd request, but I promise no matter what financial level you're at, you can do it. The same way you would for a car or anything else, you make the commitment to live below your current means and put money aside over a long enough period of time. Because the other harsh reality is that if you don't, if you try to publish this by yourself without getting picked up by a trad publisher, then you will more than likely not pick up the audience you want to. If you want to be taken seriously in the publishing space, this is something you need, and I will go into why in a little bit here. I will say, and I've brought this example up before, but people say that writing is the cheapest job there is. It's completely free. That's kind of the argument online, is I should be able to do it for free because after all, it's just you and your thoughts and the time you put into it. But that's not actually true. I'm not personally a soccer player, but let's say I wanted to be. I could easily say that soccer is the cheapest sport because all I need is the ball and the rest is just me kicking it, perhaps with some friends that I get to join me. Now, that may be true if I was just playing in the backyard with some friends and we spray painted a goal on the fence, but if I wanted to actually dedicate myself and be taken as seriously as I could, I would not only need the ball, but I would also need the cleats, shin guards, maybe a goal, like an actual goal to shoot at, which I'd have to either build or buy. And then if I wanted to get into a league, I'd have to pay league dues. I'd need better equipment. I'd need to drive to games, which may not always be local. I may even need to help rent out the space that we play at, probably multiple times a week. I'm sure the example falls apart somewhere, but you get the idea. It's the same thing with the podcast, with this channel. Go look at our early episodes. They're garbage. I hate rewatching them. Even episodes from a couple years ago are not as good as they are now. Not only did I have to do the free part of learning how to host a podcast, but in order to be taken even remotely seriously and to have any kind of quality, I had to invest in equipment. I pay monthly for StreamYard, Adobe Premiere, licensing fees for music and sound effects. Beautiful. It's not a free hobby when you want to even attempt to succeed at it. It is the bare minimum. I will say, if you look hard enough and talk to people in your community, you will find people who are good at their job and are also reasonably priced. You don't need to pay thousands for an editor. You can find someone that is looking for work and is dedicated to what they do, especially in the indie scene. I always say that when Zach Argyle found the guy who did his cover art, I believe his name is Omer Barak Onal. Hopefully I pronounced that okay. He did absolutely incredible work, as you can see on screen here, and he only wanted to charge Zach, I think it was like $250 for all 3 book covers. And Zach, of course, paid him significantly more than that because that's just the kind of guy that he is. But it just goes to show those people are out there. They exist. You just have to look and talk to people in the community and network and kind of figure out where everybody's at. Number 2, I have beta readers that review my work and act as my editors, as well as other author friends who peer review my work. This, I'm afraid, is one of the biggest lies people tell themselves. The difference between alpha or beta readers and actual developmental editors is huge. So is the difference between, author friends peer reviewing your work and having an actual editor. Let's set aside copy and line editing and just talk about developmental editing, because I do actually kind of think that you can get most of the editing done for grammar and spelling and whatnot. I think you can get that done in other ways. But what is most needed, in my opinion, is the developmental editors. God, why is that such a hard word to say? Which is basically someone who shines a light on whether your story makes sense and will connect with a reader. And not only that, but they won't just tell you that something feels off, but they'll tell you exactly why it feels off and exactly how to fix it. They'll give you the actual breakdown of how to change things in a way where it would fix, what they're seeing. And then you as the author just do the recommended work from there. Even if you have beta readers who are not just your friends and family, who are often mostly just trying to be supportive, but even if your beta readers are completely objective, they are still playing the part of a reader. They can tell you that something feels off, but they often can't tell you why it feels off or how to fix it. They typically will notice symptoms, but not the causes, so to speak. They're often somewhat inconsistent with each other, may give vague, unhelpful feedback, or sometimes they're just too nice, even if they're not your immediate friends and family. And as the author, it can often be hard to parse the good feedback from the bad feedback. Beta readers have varying levels of skill when it comes to reading comprehension and can kind of be all over the place with what they pick up and what they don't. I mean, go watch 10 booktubers' review of the same book and you'll see exactly what I mean. Now, having your writer friends give peer reviews may seem like an even better option, and I think it is a fairly good part of the process, but it's still not comparable to a real editor. Other writers are often also focused on their own work, so they can possibly rush the reading and note-taking of your book as they're trying to finish their own drafts. And while trying to make your deadlines as well as their own, I could totally see a situation in which they're all kind of skimming each other's work. Also, since they are authors as well, they may focus on things that they care about in their own work rather than what is right for yours. However, if you do your research and find a good editor who is trained to do this kind of thing and who focuses on one project at a time, or at least has the capability and skill to handle multiple projects, then what you'll end up with is someone who will analyze your writing to the point of being able to point out specific reasons why a scene or story arc or whatever doesn't work. They won't just say this part feels slow like a beta reader will, but they'll give you, something like this example. The protagonist starts to just be reacting to the events transpiring after chapter 12 rather than driving the plot forward themselves, and makes the reader feel like they're pushing through mud to get through the plot. In addition, we repeat the same emotional beat several times within these chapters, here, here, and here. This is an example that I kind of pulled off the internet and Frankenstein while doing research for this video. I didn't come up with that, but I think it's a good distinction between what the beta readers do and what the editors do. Bottom line is that editors are way more specific and have studied and have skills relating to things like story architecture, scene purpose, character arcs, tension and escalation, theme integration. The list goes on and on. All of these you can look up to see what an editor is studied in. And these are not things that you're going to get from readers. Readers may recognize these things in their reading. As a reviewer, I comment on these kind of things all the time, but they're not going to be able to pinpoint where things are going wrong or even where they're going right exactly. Beta readers are not equivalent to a developmental editor, and writing community peer reviews are great, arguably better than beta readers, but certainly come with their own drawbacks that simply don't compare to someone who is paid, like their job is to sit and focus on your work and comment in a way that is a honed skill unto itself. Number 3, I edit it myself. After writing, I take lots and lots of time to go over my work several times and do my own editing. Here's the thing, it's obviously important to do this anyway, to do multiple drafts and to try to work out as many of the kinks as you possibly can by yourself, but you still need to send it to an editor, and here's why. Exhibit A, and perhaps one of the most important points, familiarity blindness. I actually didn't know the specific terminology until a couple days ago, but I did express the same idea during last Saturday's live stream. If you'd like to go check that out, we actually had a whole segment where we kind of talked about this, and that is what sparked this video. Basically, what this means is that you, as the author, already know the story. You know how the characters are feeling most of all, and what their motivations are. You know what they're thinking. And because you already know this in your head, your brain may fill in the gaps while you're reviewing your own work and writing, and it may make perfect sense to you why the characters are doing what they're doing or why the plot is moving in a certain direction, but you may come to find out later that readers aren't quite getting it because it wasn't expressed as clearly to someone with fresh eyes as it is to you. Because of this, you may judge scenes based on what you meant to convey rather than what is actually communicated to the reader in the text, whether by showing or telling or however you choose to do that. Honestly, this one feels quite obvious and is often the reason people use things like beta readers, but I'm including it for the people that want to do all of this on their own. There's also an emotional attachment that you have to your work. It's your book baby after all. It's perfectly understandable. However, there's definitely going to be scenes that you like so much that you won't want to cut them out, even if you need to. As a podcaster, I can perfectly relate to this. You guys will likely never know how many pages and pages and pages of notes are scrapped every single episode and fall into the void in order to keep a podcast episode or video from going for 4 hours like this one probably is. But even in this video that you're watching right now, there was pages of scrapped rambling thoughts that I really enjoyed putting together and I think are really interesting additions to this conversation, but needed to be scrapped for, the sake of time and coherency. So I guess what I'm saying is you're welcome. Lastly, there is a kind of brain fog aspect, is the only way that I can describe it. I can't even fathom how many times you're reading over the same paragraphs and pages upon pages of your book, and the more passes you make over your work, the more you will become blind to repeated issues. Like we had mentioned earlier, multiple instances of the same emotional beats, similar sentence structure, etc. At a certain point, you're literally skimming your own work because you know it so well. At this point, you can revise, but you can no longer read your work with fresh eyes. I know some people take big breaks from writing and try to come back with fresher eyes, but I imagine it is never quite the same as having a brand new perspective on the book. So as we start to wrap up here, finally, I know, I'll talk about the reader experience in all of this, because ultimately that's what I am. I'm probably a little bit more critical than most in the way that I look at books, but at the end of the day, I just want to enjoy a story. For authors who want to succeed in the publishing space, even if it's self-publishing, there's going to be a significant difference between good enough and professional quality. And readers have so many options. How many booktubers do you watch that talk about their endless backlog? I think Jim from Fantasy for the Ages has said that in his backlog, which he actually writes down and keeps track of, he has so many books on it that even if he were to read every single day without stopping, there's no way he would finish the list before he dies. That is what you're competing with. So stepping into that professional quality is often what is needed to get your book into the hands of readers. Readers may not always be able to spot technical issues, or maybe you think they won't notice if something is just a little bit off, but I promise you, we do feel them. I can tell if I have read a book that has not been edited properly or at all. We can't always articulate why, but we pick up on it when something is off. Reviews that say, "This is slow." People, have you seen that before? They translate to, "There's a pacing issue." "I didn't connect with the characters." How many times have we seen this? It means there's a problem with the POV or conveyance of the character's motives or emotions. Something has not been communicated properly, and that is where an editor comes in. Good enough means the story is readable and makes sense, but professionally polished is something like Name of the Wind, which I know is a high bar to set, and I don't actually expect anyone to meet that standard. But if you look at what that book does, it pulls you in, it lulls you along as it fills your mind with pure escapism and wonder, just wanting to sit in that world with those characters completely immersed. There's a difference, is there not? And I honestly don't think that good enough is actually, good enough anymore. Whew! Woo! What a video. I have so much more I could say on this topic. Like I said, I had to cut a bunch of stuff out. But if you like these kind of video essay type topical discussions or whatever this is, then let me know down in the comments. Or if you'd like to hop on a live stream sometime, I'm doing them fairly often nowadays. You can talk to me there and we can chat about it some more. I'm always happy to. This could also lead into a conversation about authors doing their own book covers or recording their own audiobooks, which I'm also not a fan of really at all. But there's the occasional exception, but for the most part. But it would essentially be the same argument I just made. A lot of the points would be really similar, and that's surely a video for another day if I did want to. But again, let me know if you'd like to see something like that. I'll keep an eye on the comments, which I'm sure are bound to be interesting for this video. I think I'd also like to do a video on the necessity nowadays of indie authors having to be their own marketers. There's a lot to say about that, and it's a pretty harsh reality. Funnily enough, it's kind of the flip of the argument I just made, where it's kind of like you got to do the thing that you don't want to do, and you shouldn't do the thing that you do want to do. It's life's tough, you know? Again, I'm just a guy putting my thoughts out there. Take them with a grain of salt or take them to heart. I can only say what I've experienced and what my own opinions are. But thank you so much for hanging out for this. I'm sure this video has ended up being significantly longer than I planned, like they usually are. And I really do appreciate your time. Feel free to hit the like button if you enjoyed this. It certainly helps me out a lot. Or use those new hype points or whatever they are. But otherwise, if you'd like to reach out or anything, all of our links are down below in the description. We got Twitter, we got Discord, we got Patreon, where you can watch us record our podcast episodes live and actually chat with us while we do and ask questions. And when we bring authors on, it's a great time to ask them questions. So check that out if you're interested. But with that, I'm going to get out of here and start editing this video. So just be glad that you only had to listen to this thing once, because I'm gonna have to do it multiple times. All right, everyone, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.